everyone, this is Speaker Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and in continuing to pay tribute to the late, great Gene Hackman, I'll take a look back at some of his most outstanding movies. And here I'll look back at the superb, tense submarine thriller, Crimson Tide. Released on May the 12th, 1995, it stars Denzel Washington, Gene Hackman, Viggo Mortisen, James Gandolfini, George Dzunda, and it was directed by Tony Scott. The story is set within the backdrop of Soviet Russia, where a military rebel group led by Vladimir Radchenko have taken control of a nuclear missile, threatening to detonate it if they are threatened. To combat this, the US Navy assigned submarine USS Alabama to prepare a counterstrike in case the nuclear missile is fired. Experienced veteran Captain Frank Ramsey leads the mission and hires less experienced Commander Ron Hunter, who does have some knowledge of military strategy. Whilst the crisis against the Russians is enough to generate plenty of stress and concern, an even greater conflict takes place on the submarine between both Ramsey and Hunter. Both men have an unwavering belief in their methods and strategies, and their convictions escalate into a furious clash against one another, which threatens both the stability of the crew and the entire mission itself. Now, when looking back at Crimson Tide, it is absolutely a terrific thriller full of pulsating tension and suspense. Whilst it steadily builds into the beginning of its story, once the story gets onto the submarine, the movie is riveting and compelling, with the pace barely letting up. And yes, this type of movie, the submarine actioner if you like, when it's done well, will always be tense. The setting within the submarine will provide plenty of excitement and claustrophobia within the closed spaces of the submarine, much more compelling than the actual underwater action scenes that we see outside of it. We already saw this type of film executed to successful effect in the beginning of the 1990s with The Hunt for Red October, but I would dare say that Crimson Tide might be the superior movie. It looks absolutely great cinematically and is very well produced, and despite being a submarine thriller, definitely has that aura of a big action epic, and that's due to the direction of Tony Scott. But also a big contributor to this is the Hans Zimmer musical score. So typical, we get those big horns and that synthesized tone and beating drums, and there are so many overtones within this score of what we would hear the following year in 1996 with the action epic The Rock, which is again Hans Zimmer at its absolutely best. Absolutely great stuff to hear. But for all of the action and production, the true heartbeat and selling point of this movie is the irresistible dynamic between Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman, who are two undisputed generational acting heavyweights. The late great Hackman at this stage was the elder statesman within the industry, already immortalised with his roles within both The French Connection, Superman the movie, and also Unforgiven. We contrast that with Denzel Washington, who back then was the current Hollywood movie star who would go on to attain much more of the legendary status similar to Hackman within the next 10 to 15 years of this release. And just seeing these two against one another just elevates the film a couple of levels every time they both appear on screen. We take a look at the two characters, and there could be more of a critical analysis here, and that they do play very typical racial stereotypes. Ramsey being the older, white, revered establishment figure of the past, very much set in his ways, fiery and stubborn and combustible. And we contrast that with Hunter being the more slick, confident, at times cocksure, black, new leader, looking to change things with his different ways. We could look deeper into this and say that the dynamic here is very similar to what we saw with both Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier in the Heat of the Night movie, and both Hackman and Washington's casting definitely evokes that pairing so much. And the racial overtones were emphasised in a completely unnecessary scene between the two characters, where they speak about a breed of stallion horses and the fact that they are all white. It really feels completely out of tone. Typically, this scene was included by Quentin Tarantino, told to add in more dialogue to generate more interest into the characters. So again, no surprises here considering what we've seen within Tarantino's work. But once more, it just feels at odds with the rest of the movie, as any racial tension between the two characters just isn't required. But despite all of this, as I mentioned, it's still a joy to see both Hackman and Washington together on screen, a prime example of two cinematic titans colliding together to maximum effect. And within the 90s, we probably had the best example of this, with of course Al Pacino and Robert De Niro combining together for the crime epic Heat. We would also see a couple of years later, after Crimson Tide, both John Travolta and Nicolas Cage setting the screen ablaze with the action epic face-off. And movies like this are just an example of what you can achieve when you get two established actors at the right time within the right movie and provide them with a script that gives them plenty of scope to infuse their characters with much intensity, and the confrontations are very much key to the story rather than just providing fan service. And overall, this combination is just what makes the movie absolutely great, and it would have suffered if these two actors weren't in it, no doubt. So we then move on to the movie's release, and Crimson Tide was a solid box office success, grossing over $157.4 million on a budget of $53 million, gaining much critical reception also, with many film critics praising the performances of both Denzel and Gene Hackman, as well as the action and tension that we see throughout the film. And if we really look back at Crimson Tide, the way that it's produced, especially with the music, I think it really set the tone for the aesthetic of what we would see later on throughout the 90s in terms of that big action epic blockbuster. We would see later on with the likes of The Rock in 1996 and Con Air and Face Off both in 1997 as well. And I think Crimson Tide was a great entry point in a major shift into what we would see within action films throughout the decade. So just a very fine entry in both the careers of Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington in Crimson Tide. There's my overall thoughts and feelings when looking back at Crimson Tide. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you have any other further movies, television series, or any other entries within the pop entertainment and culture scene that you'd like to see me cover within the channel, also let me know within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.